I have completed True Detective Night Country, the new season in the highly acclaimed series, a show that is beloved by many, including myself. It has a very divisive reaction, and I'm going to dive headfirst into that. I'm going to be talking full spoilers for this entire season and discuss what I liked and what I didn't like. So, let's get into it. I firstly just want to talk about the divisive nature of this show. I think some of it has to do with the completely different creative decisions that were made that feel like they stray maybe too far away from where we started in the first season of True Detective. There's also another side that just cannot stomach seeing female leads and a female director. And if you're one of those people, I feel bad for you because sometimes you do miss out on some really, really excellent television and films. But I think a lot of people, including myself, just shot ourselves in the foot because we were kind of expecting that this would be the return to form that True Detective really needed. The first season of True Detective is one of the greatest seasons of television of all time. Just phenomenal episodes that will be remembered forever with just some titanic performances. Season 2, I have seen about half of that and I could not get into it at all. It doesn't live up to the quality of the first season by any means. And season 3 I haven't watched yet. I will eventually. And now I'm stepping in with Night Country. And this is where we probably should have had our expectations in check, because I do think that if we teamed up Cary Joji Fukunaga as well as Nick Pizzolatto, once again the creative minds behind the first season, I don't know if they'd be able to recreate that lightning in a bottle that they managed to do in the first season. It just felt like it was at the right time, right place. Matthew McConaughey was just in the middle of his peak where he was just the best actor alive, and it was just such compelling television. Night Country has different creative minds. Issa Lopez is basically the person that has got full creative freedom here, and that could have been seen as an error by a lot of people because it didn't seem like she was experienced enough to helm a show as esteemed as this one. And I kind of agree with that and disagree with some points, because I do think overall that True Detective Night Country does have some superior moments that reminded me of those glory days of the first season. However, it just doesn't reach those heights ever. The overall theme of True Detective has always been exploring a case, but we're also exploring the most personal moments of the detectives working on the case. And that can almost be more compelling than the case itself. This kind of wants to stray away from both a little bit at times and feels very hesitant at really just pushing forward and giving us more to chew on as an audience. The first episode gives us a really nice setup with an interesting case that feels completely different to what we've seen before. There is a lot more spirituality here, as well as some kind of hauntings that just don't seem like they match what True Detective is. It is based in realism. Yes, there are themes of religion and then cults and everything like that, but we never really see ghosts or anything like that. In Night Country, we see a little bit more of that here. So it is interesting, and you can really be a little bit trepidatious in the beginning as you're wondering, is this going to fit in True Detective, or is this just going to be some rubbish where they just try to go for a home run and completely miss? And I think that they could have hit that home run. I really do. But they spent too much time fucking around in the middle of the season to just not push the story forward. There's little moments, it gives you little bite-sized chunks. It seemed like the structure for almost every single episode, apart from the finale, is that you get 50 minutes of almost nothing. Just a little bit of details here and there that lay some groundwork, but it doesn't feel urgent. It's not moving the narrative forward like you want it to. And then you'd get 10 minutes of real captivating television, and then it would end. And that would become really frustrating in some episodes, and not so much in others, as it would give you a little bit more to chew on. Some episodes felt like a complete nothing burger, and that became really frustrating. This is only a 6-episode season, So you really need to have that urgency. You really need to push the narrative forward because you don't have that much time and you don't want to hinge everything on that final episode. The case itself, I do think, is fascinating, and the introduction to that is fascinating. Having these scientists explore and do research in this lab in Alaska, and then this supernatural kind of thing occurs, and then you have the detectives really looking into this case. You have one played by Jodie Foster, who is obviously a white woman, and Carly Rice, who is Native American, and you see these two different perspectives clash. One looking at it more at a critical, analytical level, and one looking at it at more of a spiritual level. And I like that. I like that we're having two different perspectives here. That's kind of what we see in season 1. Completely different, of course, but you do see these two ideologies come together, and that causes clashes between the two. And I think the dynamic between Jodie Foster and Carly Rice, phenomenal. Definitely the highlight of the show for me overall. Jodie Foster in particular, phenomenal. She is such a fantastic actress, and it just seems like she's just bringing it role after role. And this is probably some of her strongest work that I've seen in a while. Really, really owns this performance, and her character is deeply fascinating as she doesn't really want to let anyone in. She's very cold to everyone around her, and you're trying to figure out why that is. Carly Rice is a little bit like that as well. She's phenomenal in this. I don't think that I've seen her in anything before. I know that she was a boxer, and kudos to her for really diving in here, taking on this challenging role, and I think delivering on that. But once again, unfortunately, I really want to know more about these characters, and episode 2, 3, 4, 5, it's just not giving you that as much as you'd like. You get a little bit in episode 1, and you get quite a lot in episode 6. I think the finale does deliver on being quite a decent episode in of itself, but they gave themselves too little time to really wrap this up in an extremely satisfying way. I think it's a solid episode. You get a lot of character development as you're looking at this case that these two worked on in the past, and you're not quite sure what the details are, but you kind of suspect that these two were really horrified by the crime that had occurred and killed the murderer behind it and covered it up. We get all those details given to us finally in this final episode. We see the scene where Navarro, played by Carly Rice, shoots this abuser, and they cover it up. And they're kind of hiding that the whole way through, and that might make this good on subsequent rewatches, but once again, I don't want to have to trudge through so much tedium to get to just these real good character building moments. I have to talk about the ending itself as well, because it is fascinating, and I think it will leave audiences divided. There's a lot of ambiguity there, as it kind of alludes to Navarro walking out across the lake or ocean. It's all frozen over, and when a lot of people do that, they end up dying because the conditions are just far too harsh. So it kind of hints that maybe she took that walk and she is now dead. And it kind of has this Dark Knight Rises-esque ending where it's cutting all these really short scenes together. The music's building and building, and you're kind of leading up to a final scene, a final shot that will hopefully give you some answers. And it seems like it gives you that ambiguity of, is she dead as a ghost in this world? As it seems like that whole spiritual element is really real in this show. They don't really give it too much of an explanation, except for it's just a spiritual thing. Or is she off the grid and she's now living with Jodie Foster, away from everyone, where she can kind of start fresh? The way that the episode was headed, I feel like she probably died, but it kind of almost doesn't matter once again, because we didn't build it up properly enough where it just delivers on just this wow moment that it's trying to do. And I think that goes into the inexperience of Issa Lopez. I think she tried her absolute hardest. There are some great touches from her creativity that I definitely saw. There are some great moments here. There's some great ideas in here. So I do appreciate her efforts, and I do think she does as good of a job as she can with this series. However, I don't know if she just had that repertoire to really just punch us in the gut and deliver on just that stuff that peak True Detective would give you, where it would really make you think and connect with these characters and question their every move. A character like Russ Cole in season 1 was so mysterious. You were figuring him out throughout the entire season, and it almost leads you to believe for a second that he might be the killer, even though everything beforehand had you completely thinking the opposite, that he was just driven to figure out this case. And then there's a shot or two that kind of allude to that, and then you're kind of questioning yourself all the way to the end of this season where the answers get handed to you. That is masterful storytelling, masterful character work that I just saw a lack of in True Detective Night Country. Finally, in terms of technical scope, I do think it is quite good in terms of cinematography. However, visual effects do play a part in here, especially in the first episode, and they look awful. True Detective does not utilize visual effects like that. It's very grounded, gritty stories, and I just want to see less of that here. But when we do get it shoehorned in, it just doesn't look that great. But there is a great sense of atmosphere in this show. Because we're in Alaska, you just have pitch black all around these characters at all times, and there's a sense of mystery here. And there's this blaring wind, and you could confuse that for the sound of whispering. So it adds to that creepy tension that this show tries to build. And when there is a jump scare, I do think they work fine enough. The atmosphere, though, definitely a great point to this show. I loved the setting of it all. And I think it goes for what Issa Lopez was trying to go for. She really wanted to replicate that tension from a movie like The Thing, where you see clear influences from and homages to. And I do think she does a good job of doing that. I'm a little bit torn on this season of television. I'm kind of torn between two scores here, but I think I'm going to be a little bit kinder and give True Detective Night Country a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's a good enough season of television. And I know some of you will disagree with that. I know it has such a mixed reaction, and that's fine. However, just being good is not True Detective Season 1. We are very far from that quality, and don't get it twisted. I'm not going to hold it up to that level. It never reaches that level. Not even the worst episode of True Detective Season 1 is on the level of the best episode of True Detective Night Country. That is how big of a gap we have between these two seasons. But just looking at it on its own, I think it's fine enough. I do think some of the reactions are a little bit too much. If you haven't seen it yet and you're kind of on the fence on whether you want to or not, I say check it out, but just keep your expectations in check. I think it's better than Season 2 at least. I can't speak on Season 3, but yeah, definitely not on the level of Season 1. And just keep that in your head while you're watching this show. Because I think there are things that are worth watching here in terms of the performances. An interesting case that we haven't quite seen before. It does some interesting things. I watched it week to week, and while I wasn't exactly impressed with every single episode, there were flashes of brilliance in here that I do think are worth just watching this 6-episode show. And those are my thoughts towards True Detective Night Country. I'm sure there's plenty of other points to talk about. I want to hear it from you guys. If you've seen the show, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'm sure some of you will either completely agree with me or just think I am talking out of my ass here. Either, let me know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.